Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 344. And my next guest, we're going to talk about legacy. Not just legacy based on my book, but this is legacy based on family values and maybe upbringing and restoring homes. So I want to bring in my next guest, Kim McFaline, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm
No,
excited.
I found you on Facebook, but I think it was from a mutual friend, Jeff Watson.
Yes, sir.
I helped with his book, Boa's on Business, which is an awesome book.
It sure is.
But you've known Jeff for a long, long time, and you're also involved in what's called deal makers.
Yes. I don't know
And
him.
and so
Well. I know him. I know him. I've gotten to know him better. Yes. Yes. It's been an evolving friendship.
yeah, it's I like Jeff. He's a unique individual. And I said to him the one night, I said, you kind of remind me sometimes of the new Reacher character. You're just commanding when you come into a room,
He
but
sure is.
but you're also soft and gentle.
He
And
sure
he
is.
goes, I'll take that as a compliment. Well, you should. And I think we need more individuals like Jeff out there that that are knowledgeable, are helping people. And that's part of Jeff's legacy, what he wants to be remembered by. But I'm looking at your website, and you take these dilapidated homes all over, not just in your area, but everywhere, and you restore their beauty. And to me, it's not just a house flipper. I think those people who just say I'm a house flipper, they kind of have a bad connotation. They you are doing something totally different. You're bringing life back into these homes.
Well, I've been restored. And so I was once that dilapidated old house that no one wanted to touch, no one wanted to look at, no one wanted to be involved in. And so I was restored. And when I look at these old homes, especially historical homes, and I see their beauty that they once had, it ignites a feeling of wanting to preserve them, right? To restore them and to preserve as much character as I possibly could. It's like you said, it's more than just it. I don't even like to call myself a flipper. I like to
Hmm.
call myself a restorer. Uh,
Hmm.
I believe in restoring anything that was, once beautiful, even if it's not beautiful, even if it wasn't beautiful to begin with, to be able to look at something and see a vision and envision what you think it may have looked like back in the day
Hmm.
and to keep some of those components and bring it to life and restore it and give it a second chance is what it's about. I mean, God has given me a second chance, and I just feel like that's just a way for me to continue
Hmm.
to follow his path.
Hmm.
This is what he's called me to do.
It's I live in an old home. Well, I can't really say it's an old home. It is an older home, but some of the things that I look at when because my house was built in the 50s. And a lot of people say, well, that's an old home. The homes today I think, are just built junky. They slap the thinnest material on there, and then they wonder why it blew away in the storm. And then I look at my father-in-law's home. I mean, it was built 200 years ago, and you could see the evolution of that house, how it was built. Where the joists were expanded,
Yep,
and the framing. If you ever see an old home, and I'm sure you have, is that you go into an entrance and it's really thick. That was probably the original outside door. And they
absolutely.
expanded it. And you just don't see that in new homes.
No,
The older homes were built thick, they were built to stay, and that's why they last 200, 300 years.
absolutely.
you
And
know.
there's so much character behind them, so
Right.
much history behind them.
Yeah,
We like to dig a little deeper and see if we can find information on the house itself and families that have lived in there, where they came from, what they did. I restore homes in Georgia, the
mhm,
South, so has a lot of history. From slavery to military men, being comforted and cared for in
mhm,
homes during war. And so to me, it's much more than just flipping a house.
right.
Sure.
You look at the whole story, and I think that's better. I mean, yeah, that I've had people say, Rob, can you help me write my flipper book? And I admire them and I want to help, but that's all it is. You got to have stories in there.
Absolutely.
Why do you want to do this? You know? And I think it takes a special type of person like yourself that goes into a home and wants to understand the full story.
Another thing that we've started to incorporate too is when we go into a home, we acknowledge the home.
Hmm.
We 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 let the home know what we're here for.
Hmm.
Right? And we walk through the process with the home, and we've had some experiences in the past where we didn't do that, which brought us to now doing that. I really believe that homes have their own spirits. I wouldn't necessarily call them, spirits of another realm, but they have so much history and so much. What's the word I'm looking for? There's emotion behind it,
Right.
and so when we walk in, we bless it and we actually asked the house, what would you like us to do with you?
Hmm.
Are you okay with us restoring it? If there's a little bit of resistance, tell us what that resistance is. And it may sound, crazy to some people, but we feel more confident, we feel better
Right.
that we're working with the house as opposed to working on the house.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
well, my
big thing.
the second house that I lived in was haunted. And I didn't believe it at first. We were in that house for 10 years. And midway through, my wife's like, I don't like being in here. The house is haunted. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And so we're sitting at the kitchen table, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something go up the steps. I say, hey, was that your brother? She goes, my brother left like 3 hours ago. What are you talking about? And she said that was it. So
Yep.
we started prepping the house and it took us a couple of years, but we finally got out of that house and when we bought the house that we're in, what was funny is that the first year we would hear all these creaks and noises and whatnot, but those went away after we sat down and said, this is what we're going to do to the house. Are you okay with it?
Oh, yeah.
And I think the original owner who was looking over the house felt that okay, we're going to go do right by him, and we haven't heard anything from him since.
So here's the story. We purchased a house in the Poconos, Lake Ariel. Biggest house we had ever purchased to restore. We were going to keep it as a short-term rental. We wind up selling it to another short-term rental owner. But long story short, a house that was only supposed to take us a few months was like it was every time a simple little task that we needed to fix turned into like something major, right?
Hmm.
Or that it just took longer. And every time we had gone there, we didn't feel we felt at ease, but it was more of like we felt like very calm, but very slow at getting things done, right? We just didn't have the energy every time we walked in to get these things done. So it would take us longer. And one night, a friend of mine said to me, why don't you just ask the house, ask the house what it needs
Hmm.
or tell the house what you want to do with it. And I said, oh, okay, well, okay. So that night I walked around and I said, what do you want us to do? Or maybe I should tell you what we plan on doing, and then maybe you can feel at ease. I said, so this is what we want to do. We want to restore this home. It's beautiful. I just want to bring it back to its original character, maybe add a few things to it and give it to a nice family. At the time, that's how we thought we were going to sell it if we weren't going to keep it. And I said, just show me what you want us to do.
Hmm.
And so that night my husband and I sleeping in the master bedroom because we lived up there for a little bit to restore it. And I wake up in the middle of the night with like, I feel like something's crawling on me. We turn the lights on and there's all these bugs flying around just in the master bedroom where we are. No, no other rooms where my boys are. And my husband and I were like, this is so strange. So we leave, we go into another room. The next morning we wake up, there are no bugs anywhere. So I messaged my friend and I said, hey, Amy, this is so strange. This is what happened. What do you think? And she said, well, let me ask you, what do you think? What did you feel?
Mhm.
I said, well, I felt like they were a nuisance, like all these bugs flying around. She said, and that's how the house feels about you. So you really need to dig deep and you really need to explain exactly what you're doing to this house. I
Mhm.
said, okay. Gentleman drives by, he stops and he knocks on the door and he says, hey, I see you've been working on the house. This used to be my brother's house. You know, we invited him in. He was like, oh my God, it's looking beautiful. So I said, there's this feeling in this house of like an older soul, right? That kind of he's not grumpy, but he's a little irritated about what we're doing. And every time we come in, it's like a very slow process. Like we have no energy, no oomph to do anything. And he said, that's my brother, Rob. My brother was an accountant. He was great with numbers. He would start projects and never finish them. And so he loved this house. He had so many ideas for it, but he was never able to finish any of them. And so it made sense. And so that night after the brother left, I said, hey, I'm here. Just guide me and tell me what you want to do. From that moment on, everything just ran smoother. And I think he was just so happy with what we accomplished because I let him know, or let the house know, let him know, hey, this is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, let us know. And every time we ran into smaller issues, I would say, okay, Rob, tell me what you want me to do. And he would just guide us. I
Yeah.
know it sounds strange to a lot of people, but it worked for us. And from that point on, I realized we have to come into these houses and we have to acknowledge them, we have to respect them, and we have to, let them know what we want to do. And if there's any, pushback, they can tell us what they want us to do with it. They have to be a part of the process.
Yeah. And for those that are listening that think it's woo-woo, it's not really because these old homes have so many stories, so much history, and you don't know who's stuck, in
Right.
these homes, whether or not they've gone on to you know, the next realm. But I never really believed in ghosts or spirits before until, that incident, and from that point on, it's like, okay, we got to do this a little differently.
Right, right, right.
And but I live in an area where still late at night sometimes I'll hear old buggies
Mm,
with old voices, and this area that I live in used to be all Indian land.
yes.
And so, although it is peaceful and I don't have a lot of traffic here, um, yeah, sometimes late at night. And it's not that my mind's wandering. It's, I've heard it, my kids have heard it, the neighbors have heard it, and we've all investigated. We can't find it, so it's just what it is.
Right. That's it. It is what it is.
So how did you get started doing this? Because, not everybody just wakes up. Oh, well, my father-in-law, he was a carpenter, so he loved restoration projects. But not everybody just wakes up and say, "Hey, I'm going to restore a house."
So my dad was a carpenter, and my parents were from Italy, and they worked really, really hard. They came here, and actually, they were born here. Their parents came here,
Mhm.
and neither one of them graduated out of high school. They had seven brothers and sisters, each one of them. So, and they were the oldest, so they had to take care of their siblings, and that's just what Italians did when they came here. You leave school and you take care of your family. And so my father became a carpenter. He was in the union in New York City for quite some time. And, they would do odds and end jobs. And my mom sewed Chanel ties by hand for majority of her adult life. And so I learned early on that I was an entrepreneur. And I never really fit in. I have three older sisters, they all work, they all had, steady jobs, and I couldn't keep a steady job for the life of me. I just felt like I was stuck, right? And my mom would always call me her fourth leaf clover. I'm born on St. Patrick's Day, fourth child. And she would also call me a butterfly, and she would say, when your wings are clipped, that's when you don't do so very well. But when you're able to open them up and fly, you excel at anything you do. And so I would keep a job and, I would have a job and then, leave because it just wasn't fulfilling.
Hmm.
I wasn't an insurance agent for 12 years. And I'll tell you this, I had a great boss who allowed me to be myself. And I loved helping people with insurance besides just auto insurance and homeowners insurance. Life insurance can be a game changer for generational
Right.
wealth. So that was really important to me that I was able to educate people. Long story short, um, my dad got sick. He developed lung cancer. We moved back up north to take care of him. He passed away. And then my mom was up north and she didn't want to come to Georgia with us, which is understandable. She was,
Hmm.
born and raised in Brooklyn. And so we stayed. We wound up moving to New Jersey. But after my father passed away, we sold my parents' house so my mom could move in with us. And my mother said to me, "You're in charge. I want you to take some of the inheritance and split it a quarter to each one of your sisters and you." And so we got some money. And I realized that I had to do something with it to fulfill my parents' legacy, right? They worked so hard to get this little home,
Hmm.
paid, I think it was 90,000 at the time, and we sold it for 625. And so long story short, I knew I needed to do something with it. And I knew that I didn't want to work 9 to 5.
Hmm.
And so we bought this little beach cottage at the Jersey Shore a month before COVID hit, literally a month before COVID hit. So we were trying to get this property for less than what we paid for, and we thought it wasn't a great deal. In hindsight, it was like the best deal we've ever had, right?
Hmm.
COVID hit a month later. And so we bought this house, we fixed it up in 3 weeks because we had to get it ready once we closed on it. During COVID, it took us 5 months to close. So we had 3 weeks to fix it up to get it ready for the summer. We did. And my mom came to see it and she said to me, "I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you've done. You make my heart so happy that I know I don't have to worry about you."
Hmm.
And that was the opening for me. I realized, okay, this is what I need to do. So instead of instead of looking at it like, this is a one-time deal, I realized I think I can do this. This was a small little cottage that was devastated from Hurricane Katrina. And so it was just sitting there. They did some work. The contractors had done some work for the owner who was from LA, but it wasn't great work. But anyway, that was how I started. And I realized I think I can do this. I
Hmm.
like restoring homes. And I like the fact that my mom is happy and content with this. And so it kind of just snowballed from there. I was the first, I'm the baby, but I was the first one to graduate from college. And so I had realized that I was an entrepreneur with a college degree, but was never going to use that college degree. And
Hmm.
so I needed to expand. I needed to really figure out what I wanted to do. And while we were storing this cottage, I realized this is it. This is it. This is what I want to do. And so it kind of snowballed from there. My mom passed away, and I really do it for them too. You know, I believe in building generational wealth. I come from generation of poverty. And so now it's about generation of properties. That's how I see it now. So that's where I'm at. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I'm at. That's how I
I,
started.
I've heard you say "I believe" multiple times, and I think every entrepreneur out there needs to keep saying that to themselves
I
because
agree with you on that.
because you know whether an opportunity comes along, if you don't believe in it, you're not going to do it. I had a cleaning business for 19 years, but when I started that, I believed in myself. I believed that I could do this. And my wife, her name is Kim, just like yours. She gave me 3 weeks. No, I don't. She said, first of all, you can't clean for shit. Second of all, I just don't think this is going to work for you.
Uh,
I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I knew deep down I had to make it work.
right.
And so, I struggled for 3 years and finally learned how to properly market myself. I went
Mm,
out and took marketing lessons. I did whatever I had to do, and that changed the dynamic of what I could do, what I could charge, and our business at the time I think increased by like tenfold as soon as
mm,
I learned how to do proper marketing. And
right.
then I started teaching, other cleaners how to market themselves, and so I was running two different businesses at the same time. And then 9/11 hit,
Mm,
and I thought, well, you know what, the cleaning business is really going strong. It's in demand. I'll put the consulting on hiatus for a while. And but what I should have done is sold the cleaning business and gone full time into consulting. But everybody was scared because of 9/11. So,
sure.
um, but I'm glad things worked out the way they did because it made me a stronger marketer. It made me realize that I needed still to learn. And sometimes the Lord gives you opportunities and says, "Okay, here's a fork in the road. You pick."
Free
And
will.
sometimes it can work out real well. And
Right.
sometimes you just need that push to teach you more stuff so that when you are ready, it's kind of a no-brainer. And when I sold the cleaning business, it was because my consulting business was taking off, and I knew that I could do this without the cleaning business. But the guy who bought the cleaning business didn't want to charge what I charged, didn't want to use the marketing, and went bankrupt probably within a year.
Mm.
So that it's you have this great opportunity. So you bought and sold your first place, and then what? Was it right
Well,
away that you got your second one, or?
the beach house we kept as a short-term rental.
Mm,
So that was our very first one. We sold my parents' house, but yeah, so the first one we kept, and we realized, oh, this is working. The short-term rental thing is working. And so we picked up another one in the Poconos,
mhm,
small little cabin, really cute. It was in the Hideout. I don't know if you've ever heard of it in Lake Ariel.
mhm.
It's an HOA. And so we were pretty happy with the deal. Realtor said, they've been doing short-term rentals here for 40 years. It's one of the best places to do short-term rentals. So we buy this little cabin and we fix it up. We spend 40,000 on it to fix it up. And right as we're finishing, the HOA decides they don't want short-term rentals anymore. Right? Gotta love the short-term rentals. I know you have a book on that, Rob.
Yeah, well, the new book series coming out is Can Go to Hell series, and that was all. My daughter's in her 30s, and it was her uh, husband who got her into a little bit of financial trouble, and they're digging themselves out. But they had a collection company after them, and she finally got so fed up. She says, "You can go to hell," and that's what I based the whole
Book
series on.
series.
And
Oh,
so I got debt collectors can go to hell, HOA boards can go to hell, slumlords can go to hell, and the IRS can go to hell. And they're consumer advocacy books that teach people how to fight back.
yes,
I'm not saying, hey, look, if you have a debt, don't pay it. What I'm saying is that, maybe it's an unfair debt that you need to fight, because,
absolutely.
I've gotten letters in the mail. They confuse me with somebody else. And, so you have to learn how to fight back, and HOAs are notorious, and they can suck the lifeblood right out of you. And, you know, when you have a property that was not really, yeah, maybe it was in the HOA, but then they changed the rules on you. No,
Hmm.
I'd be suing their ass real quick.
Oh, well, that's exactly what happened. So the short-term rental owners filed a lawsuit. To this day, they're going back and forth, and it's been since 2020. And so we wind up selling to a doctor who just wanted it as a second home. We
Hmm.
were very upfront with them. We said, listen, we're in a lawsuit with, short-term rental owners and HOA. We don't know how it's going to turn out. And so he was like, we just want it for ourselves. We just want to come up here every other weekend or whatever. So we sold it to him, and they're still fighting it. But what they did was the HOA decided we're going to tack on $1,000 fee to get a short-term rental a permit. And then if your guests stay for up to 2 days, it's $100. If they stay up to 4 days, it's 150. Anything over four, it's 250 for the stay. So they made it to where you can't make any money or
Yeah.
barely make any money.
Yeah.
And so
I have a
that,
friend that has a small cabin in the Poconos, and she was trying to sell it right after this. I guess that this went down. I don't know what came about it because it's back on the Airbnb listing, but her fees are definitely a lot higher than what they used to be.
right. And so what I realized was all of these men, because they were all men on the board,
Those
right?
aren't
They had been on the board for 20 years.
bad.
But what they didn't realize was that they found this community because they rented,
Hmm.
right? They were vacationers. That's how they found the community. And so now that they're full-time residents, they didn't want anyone else coming in. So that was my first experience with HOAs. And then I realized, don't think I want to do HOAs anymore because they can make or break you.
Yeah,
That. And they think they run everything, that you
yeah.
have no, like you said, that you have no other options but to either sell or, step down and allow them to do whatever it is that they were doing. And so we left there, we bought outside of the HOA, and worked on the property that I had mentioned before from Mr. Rob, the one who was giving us a hard time about restoring his home. And then we sold that one because it was just too far to keep for a short-term renter for us. And in between, I had done some stuff in Georgia, and then I just focused back on Georgia, and I figured Georgia and Alabama, right,
Hmm.
the border. And so I figured the opportunities are a bit better. The price ranges are a bit better. The rehabbing costs are a bit better. And there's a lot more history for me in these older homes. And so it's been a calling for me to fly down there usually every other month. And I tour some homes. I'm actually going tomorrow, and I'll be there until Friday to look at some more historical homes. And yeah, that's just
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, what is it? What is it that you're looking for? I mean, does it have to, be super old? I mean, what are the numbers involved? And
doesn't have to be super old. What's happened in my career so far is that every time I've purchased a house that had a little bit of rehab, it's always been a full rehab. It's always
Mhm.
been a full gut. So, we have this ongoing joke, myself, my manager, my property manager, project manager, and my contractor, that anything I buy, it's always just, we're going to think that we're going to pull it down to the studs, because usually that's what happens. So the numbers have to be right, obviously, first and foremost. I had purchased something on emotion because I thought it was this cute little house, and that was my big mistake. I lost money on that one, but that's okay. So it taught me a valuable lesson not to buy a house because I thought it looked pretty. Didn't cost us a lot, but we did lose on that. But it's a tax write-off, so I'm okay.
Mhm.
But anyway, numbers have to work for me. And I'm very, very conservative when I run the numbers. So if I can't get it for the price that I need to get it at, I'll just walk away. Or I'll say, if you change your mind, I'm here.
Yeah,
I
because
know that I
I
have.
noticed a lot of these homes, especially my house wasn't too bad for the electrical upgrade, but my in-laws was terrible. When my father-in-law died, my mother-in-law decided she was going to upgrade the electric, and none of the electricians around here wanted to touch it because it was all tube and knob,
Hmm.
and they'd have to drill holes and crawl through stuff, and my brother-in-law ended up doing it, and it took him a long time. And so do you strip the houses down and you take upgrade all their electric? Do you upgrade their plumbing? Do you put new AC units in?
Depends on what year it was built, right?
Hmm.
So if it has knob and tube, then we're changing it out.
Hmm.
I believe in giving a family a safe house.
Hmm.
And so I always incorporate that fee when I'm doing my rehab budget. Like we're just going to say that it just needs a whole new electric, whole new plumbing. Sometimes it needs a new roof, depending on, if the seller has put on a new roof. Most of them don't come with central air.
Hmm.
And so depending on what market we're buying in will dictate whether or not we'll put in central air. I usually do. The house that we lost money on should never have had central air, and we put it in, and that was one of our biggest mistakes. It wasn't really feasible for that area, but I wanted to give a great home to a deserving family, and that's what I did, and I'm completely okay with that.
Hmm.
And so, a lot to consider when we're looking at houses, especially the old historical ones. I buy ones that are built in the 1890s, 1910. So we know going in, we're going to need new electric, we're going to need new plumbing, we're going to have to install HVAC, probably get a new roof, probably has some joist damage. Termites are huge in the south, and so we always incorporate that, just in case there's termite damage. Sometimes asbestos, depending on when we buy it. And so we incorporate the worst case scenarios, and we allocate the rehab budget for the worst case scenarios so that we're not surprised. Because once we start opening walls, everything changes.
Do you use the same crew in all these homes, or do you hire local?
So in Georgia, we've gone through a few contractors, and a lot of them are still my friends, and I'm still friends with them. They're great, but we've learned that we have to move fast, and we need a team that's going to be moving just as fast as we are. Not saying that the previous contractors didn't, but sometimes maybe their crew wasn't big enough. Now that we're taking on older homes, we need to get in, we need to assess, and we need to figure out a game plan pretty quickly, and then we need to go into action with it. So the crew that I have now that I'm working with, he's a great guy. He's in his 30s. He's very ambitious, very, you know, happy-go-lucky. He wants to get jobs done. His biggest saying to me is, Miss Kim, I don't get rich on one, I get rich on 100. So I'm here to help you. I'm here to work with you and get it done right. And so we've used him and we're comfortable. He has about 32 subcontractors, so
Wow.
they're always rotating. We have a really great relationship. I think business relationship. I think communication is 100% the most important part of all of this.
Hmm.
If there's a lack of communication, things fall apart really, really quick. And so we've learned early on that when there is a disruption in the communication, we need to kind of get back on track real, real quick. So we do a lot of FaceTime calls, we do a lot of Zoom calls. My project manager is also my designer and my realtor, so she's hands-on.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of interaction between us. It's hard to invest out of state, but it's not as hard as people think. So
Hmm.
when you have the right crew in place, no matter if it's in your backyard or if it's out of state, when you have the right crew and your communication is on point, you can invest anywhere.
Hmm.
And so once we kind of worked out the glitches, we were able to move faster, in sync, and we got it done. We got this historical home. It should have been done in 4 months, but we had the historical zoning department. And so we had to go in front of the committee to present what we wanted to change. And they tabled it for a month because they could not envision where we wanted to put these windows. So they asked us to climb a ladder, take blue tape on the exterior, and tape out where the windows would go, and then take a picture of it. And so when we went back the following month to the board, they can visually see
Hmm.
windows would be. And so that kind of pushed us back for 4 weeks, which was okay. But we got it done. So the answer to your question is I try to stay with the same contractors, but things happen or they're not available or whatever the case is, um and we just keep it moving.
Hmm.
Moving. My project manager has been my blessing. She's my right-hand gal. Without her, none of this would be possible. So I always tell people if you're going to invest out of state, make sure you have a solid team that consists of your contractor, your property manager, or your project manager, and or your realtor. So
Hmm.
all of them. The more people you have on your team that believe in what you're doing and have the same core values as you is
Hmm.
extremely important. We always say God first, house second, money last.
Hmm.
And so without those three things, it wouldn't work.
At the very beginning, we talked about, where I mentioned deal makers. Let's talk about that because, you were just at a deal makers event in Richmond, Virginia, put on by what, Jim Ingersoll.
Yes.
And, I'm involved. Because of Jeff, I'm now in some of these groups. So I see what's going on. And I was supposed to be at that event, but I got sick and I couldn't go. And I didn't want to get anybody else sick. But I heard it was just a tremendous, tremendous event. But people join because they want to learn. They want to learn all the different tactics, the techniques, the money-making opportunities. But there again, you said it's not always about money. It's about God first, house second, money third.
Yeah. So I think what happens is you join these groups to learn, right?
Mhm.
But with Jim's group, and I am forever indebted to Jim Ingersoll. When you get into Jim's group, you realize it's not about it is about learning, but it's more than that. It's about connections, it's about networking, it's about building authentic relationships. And so my first sale maker was last year. Myself and a few other ladies had hired a mentor that we got burned from prior to Dealmaker. And so we were really reluctant to go to Dealmaker because we figured everyone was a scam artist, right? Now, myself included and my friends, we've all been in the business.
Mhm.
Some of them have been in for 20 years. And so we were really like ashamed that we had gotten burnt by a so-called guru. And so we didn't want to tell people.
Mhm.
We didn't want to share our stories because how can you get burned by someone, you've been doing this a long time. But long story short, we all decided to go to Dealmaker. And I have to tell you this, and I've spoken about this numerous times. We walked in really reluctant and really hesitant. And I remember walking through the doors to sit at the conference, and something came over me, and I said, we found our people,
Mhm.
found our place. And Jim's group it's an extension of him. He's loving, he's God driven, he's a connector. He loves connecting people. He said to me, I believe in you. And that was like, woo, he can say that to everyone in the room, but it didn't matter because when he said it to me, I knew he meant it for me.
Mhm.
I realized not everyone is a scam artist.
Mhm.
But there are many.
Oh, I've written books about scams. My one book is called Rob versus the Scammers, and it was just me dealing with these constant Visa, MasterCard scammers that contact you all the time. And I turned it into a giant sarcasm book because I put all these stories in that I'm just wasting scammers' times. And
Husband Rob does the same thing. I
and the thing is that Rob versus the Scammers ended up turning into a whole series of 8 books, and I have content for another 2 more books, and they're just funny books that make people laugh.
Yes.
But here's the thing: is that I hate scammers, and I get on average 71 scam calls a day.
Oh my goodness.
It just drives me nuts because I don't even answer the phone anymore, but it logs it. And there's a special place in hell for all those scammers.
If they put just a tenth of that of what they're doing into a legitimate thing, they could make so much money, right? I mean, I every time I pick up the phone, I think, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like, what are you doing? Like my husband will keep them on the phone 10, 15 minutes and like just go along with them,
yeah.
you know.
And if you just transcribe that conversation, it makes a great book.
It
And
does,
they just write themselves, and that's
right? We can
you know
all relate to it.
yeah. And so I had all these books coming out, and you know then I had one called Rob versus Humanity, and it came out during COVID.
Nice.
And the next one was Rob versus the Entitled.
Oh, that must be.
And that one went out, and 6 months later, Amazon pulled it because a couple people got triggered over the word entitled.
Oh,
And it's back up on Amazon now, but it was like, so, you know, for me in my past, having this carpet cleaning business, I went into a lot of old homes. I went into a lot of people that are very particular about, you know, not only cleanliness, but perfectionism. My father-in-law was a perfectionist, and I'm like, you're putting as much perfection in the back end where nobody sees the stuff as you
Mm,
do in the front end. And I get it, the reason why he did it, because it just it clicks better, it fits better, but it costs the company, it costs the client money.
right.
So when you're building these, when you're restoring these homes, I know you put care in what you do, but is it always, you know, the perfectionism is there? I mean, it's yeah, you want it to look great, but you also have to deal with your numbers.
Yeah. So, if we chase perfectionism, it's we're gonna hit a brick wall, right? So I believe in providing a house that is safe and that is structurally sound, obviously, and that is beautiful inside and out. So my integrity is everything for me. People know when they walk into my house, when they hear Kim McFaline and Pam Smith did this, they know they're going to get a great house.
Hmm.
And so if that costs me more money and I walk away with less, I'm okay with that. There's certain things that we don't skimp on.
Hmm.
Actually, we don't really skimp on anything, to be honest with you. And I'm okay with making less because my integrity is so important to me.
Hmm.
And knowing that I can restore a home and someone doesn't have to worry about it for years and years and years. The last thing I want to get is a phone call a couple weeks later. Kim, what's going on? Like what happened? And this is falling apart. I never want that call.
Right. No, but
It happens.
you're putting so much more care into these homes versus some of these new homes that are being built with sticks and sheets of I don't know what it's called. I mean, it's so thin, this insulation now, and it's like uh you know
I mean, listen, this last home we did, we had an option of doing foam spray insulation or the regular Pink Panther,
hmm.
right? Insulation, that's what I call it. And I said, well, let's talk about the difference. And so we spoke about the difference, and it was obviously more money for the foam, but it lasts longer. It's better. And so I chose that. Will the homeowner ever know what's behind the walls? Probably not. Would they really care? Probably not, but I do.
Hmm.
So I knew that that's the way that we wanted to go. And if that means that it takes a little bit longer that we finish projects, that's okay too. I always tell my team, we have a deadline, but that deadline isn't set in stone, right? Sure, I have holding costs and that costs money, but I'm not gonna beat a dead horse and tell you 100 times that we've passed the expiration date. Like we get it done when we get it done, as long as it's in a reasonable time frame. If you tell me it's 4 months and it turns into 8 months, then we have a problem,
But
right?
you
But
have, I'm sure you have turned down projects because the cost to restore would exceed the profit.
absolutely. So the house I plan on looking at on Wednesday, it's priced at 109,000 in Phoenix City, in the historical side. It's not worth that. Just by looking at it, it's not worth that. It's been on the market 244 days. I mean, looking at the pictures, I'm going to say it's probably worth about 50,
Hmm.
and maybe less by the time I get there and see it in person. But I'll offer what I feel is reasonable, and I'll explain why I'm offering that. You never want to disrespect a seller,
Right.
right? You really have to be mindful when you're speaking to them, especially if you're speaking to them directly. Like this is their property. Sometimes there's emotional attachment to it, sometimes there's not. And so I usually like to lay it out. Like this is what we feel it's worth, and this is why we feel it's worth that. And in order to get to where we need to be, because we're investors as well, right? This is what it will take, and this is the number, the end number, and this
Mhm.
is how we can get there. And if that number doesn't work for you, we understand. And so that's the way that we work it. And sometimes they're like, screw you, F you, I'm not selling you, I'm not giving it to you for free. And I'm always professional, and I always say, I understand. And I'm sorry that you feel that way. That wasn't that wasn't my intent to make you feel disrespected, but this is where we are. And these are the numbers that work for us. And others are like, okay, great. You laid it out for us. We just want to get rid of it. We're tired of it. There you go.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so At the end of the day, the numbers still have to work. I still have to know that I'm going to be able to, make this house beautiful and safe and sound, but there still has to be some kind of profit involved for me, whether that's me selling it or me keeping it and pulling my funds back out.
And there you go, everybody. The bottom line, the numbers have to work. So whatever you do in your life, for me, it's publishing, consulting, marketing. For Kim, it's restoring these awesome old homes. The numbers have to work. And yes, we can be heroes. We can go out there and say, look, I may do this for less, but you still have to make profit at the end of the day. And as a lot of you know, that my story when I first started the cleaning business, it was my slogan was, we clean your carpet, not your wallet. I wanted everybody to think that I was this cheap cleaner, but all I attracted was cheap clients. And at the end of the day, I didn't have I didn't have any profit whatsoever. So, I had to make choices. You have to make choices, but the numbers have to work. And you have to understand those numbers. So when you look at a project, you can say, yes, I'm going to make profit. And profit's not a dirty word.
No,
Every business needs to survive on money. I wish it was not that way, but money is the thing that makes the world go round. And if you want better equipment, if you want to advertise, if you want to take vacations or have a 401k, guess what? You need money. So I want you to think about that. And Kim, where can people find you?
they can find me. Well, thanks to Nicole Romano, Rockstar Landing Pages. She created my beautiful Heroes landing page. And ever since we created that, my business has gone to a whole nother level. So big ups to Nicole Romano. My landing page is Kim McFaline, so KIMMCFALINE.me. And so that's where you'll find everything about me, what I've done, what I am doing, taking on private lenders now. So that's been huge for me. I've always self-funded up until Nicole created my page, and now I am taking on lenders. You can log on and you can book a consult with me, and I can tell you everything that we do. If you're a potential seller that you have a house that's distressed and you want to get rid of, you can jump on a call with me. If you're a buyer that's looking for a home that we may be renovating and restoring, you can reach out to me. So yeah, that's where you can find me. The name of my business is Restoring is Our Calling, because I've been restored. And so that's what I'm doing now to these beautiful historical homes.
And there you go. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.
Thank you, Rob.